so much for coming. I'm Zachary Gomez. I developed this project under the advisement of Dr. Robin Kelly. I'm a part of the UCLA McNair Scholars Cohort. My project is titled The Banality of Resistance, Ambiguity, and Incarcerated Chicano Identity. I'd like to start with a dedication, first to my mother, who taught me radical care and unconditional love. And I want to preface this by saying this is a radical abolitionist history. This history seeks to recognize the humanity and agency of people at the nexus of the American carceral state. So with that, I'll share a quote from Ecclesiastes that I found in my archival research. It really emphasizes the resistance and agency of folks in prison despite the absurdity of their condition. One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind goeth towards the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually. And the wind returneth again according to his circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. Today I'll be discussing these 4 key themes and how they're related. First, I'm looking at identity formation, the significance of the 1990s, as this is a historical project. I discuss cultural resistance, and I also work towards what I call a theory of radical agency. This project is of contemporary urgency and significance. We are witnessing the ICE occupation of major cities across the United States. On the other hand, we're also seeing community defense action, particularly here in Los Angeles by Unión del Barrio. This demonstrates a modality between radical agency inside the prison and agency outside. I also hope to identify a history of resistance. That is, I'm recognizing the history of Chicanx people as one that is acutely against empire and settler colonialism. Additionally, I work towards a theory of life. I posit the wretched and dispossessed not only as victims or even as partisan fighters, but as agents choosing to live in the face of oppression. As I get into my theoretical preface, I want to define 2 terms that I contend with heavily in my project. The first being biopolitics, which was coined by French theorist Michel Foucault. He defines this as dealing with the population as a political problem and managing that problem. Additionally, I explore incarcerated phenomenology, that is the philosophy of incarcerated experience. In the book Solitary Confinement, Lisa Gunther defines this as being necessarily social, which disrupts neoliberal individualism and resists the dehumanization process of the prison. So why the 1990s? In establishing a historical context, I observed in the 1960s and 70s a rise of ethnic nationalism, which was often militant and highly principled. So think the Black Panthers and the Brown Berets. This indicated a time of an emerging social and political consciousness. However, in the 1980s, we saw the criminalization of that same ethnic nationalism, that same empowerment to marginalized communities. We also saw the expansion of the carceral state. In California alone, within that decade, they doubled the amount of prisons they had. In the 1990s, I posit that we see the rise of the disciplinary state. In order to meet the new quotas and just the space alone of these new prisons, California and other states targeted Black and brown communities to fill those prisons. In the California Street Terrorism Enforcement and Prevention Act, legislators targeted gang activity. This legislation reads, defines gang activity, as having a common name or common identifying sign or symbol, and whose members engage in or have engaged in a pattern of criminal gang activity, end quote. Legislators here take a definitive stance in assigning a semiotics and symbolism to gang activity before targeting any alleged criminal activity. In my project, I also look at the sublime. I look at what it means for transcendent politics and spirituality to constitute rebellion. I do this by radicalizing political theory and extrapolating a transcendent and sophisticated politics from autoethnography. Essentially, I'm looking at archival sources written by prisoners themselves in resistance against the carceral archive and relying on the state to tell us how prisoners are. Dean Cavano and Sarah Nam's book, Sublime of the Political, shows that contributions of people like prisoners radicalizes political theory by expanding and further delimiting the field that is often relegated to academia. In this exploration of agency, I also look at the Chicano body. And I have to kind of define it as well to explore the implications of it. First, the Chicano body, I view as a colonial subject. Or Sonny Burton's book, Tip of the Spear, defines life in prison as active war against settler colonialism and against empire. Additionally, in the case of Chicanos, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848 ceded over half of Mexico's land to the United States forcefully, creating not a stateless people, but a newly repatriated people. Second, I look at what it means for the Chicano body to be decorated or objected. Where an individual prisoner might view their own tattoos as decoration to their body, law enforcement and the state views them as abjected, creating a contradiction within the body and with an interpretation of the body. However, I also aim to show that the Chicano body is rebellious and subversive inherently. For instance, by doing these decorations and by taking these actions, they transcend the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment abolishes slavery except as punishment for a crime. Fundamentally, by taking action against the state, these people are surpassing a superimposed law that they had no choice in passing. So this all leads to what I call agency and rebellion, or a radical agency theory. Louisa Yousfi, Algerian theorist, in her book In Defense of Barbarism, discusses what it means for non-white people to choose barbarism or savagery. For Yousfi, savagery is the regression of non-white people into the expectations of white society. However, she poses an alternative, a way out, that is barbarism. For her, barbarism is the principled and reclaimed agency that one must take in order to be an active participant against empire, which brings me to the second point. Through this theoretical framework, people inside the prison, particularly Chicanos in my case, do become active participants against empire. Furthermore, it demonstrates a self-evident will to change despite the conditions of the prison. So what's next for my project? I'll be looking at the Homeboy Industries papers. The Homeboy Industries is a prisoner reentry program here in LA. So it's explicitly Catholic affiliated. These letters are written all by prisoners. In fact, this one, I'm not sure if you can see it here, but this particular person designed this entire letter. It's all hand-drawn. To me, this demonstrates an intense care for aesthetics, a deep and profound connection to the self-expression that they are sharing in these letters. Most importantly, that is resistance. I'll be looking at this to identify trends and major themes to come to more concrete conclusions in my project. Finally, I want to share one more quote. This one arose very commonly throughout these letters. Hebrews 13, 5 and 6 reads, "Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. So that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the UCLA McNair Scholars Program, to my cohort, to my directors and mentors for taking a chance on me, to my advisor for teaching me to believe in myself and reminding me to always take one more radical step, to my friends, especially my cohort friends, I love you all so much, and finally to my family, this is all for them. Thank you all so much for coming to my conference.